Thank you all for being here. As you can see here, our session right now is I Am, I Be, looking at Black men and this idea of health and generational impact, and of course looking at it from a mental health perspective. My name is David Rawl Rice. I'm chair of the Department of Psychology here at Morehouse College. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I want to bring out our friends Heather Primus, who is going to help and be in construction with us, and she's at Small Seed Family Therapy. So Heather, thank you for being here. Claps. And Brother Quest Green, if you can come on out. Was I not using my microphone? Brother Quest Green is here with us, and he's from Thank God I'm Married, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's have a seat and just kind of chop it up a little bit. So as we're talking about Black men and mental health in general, one of the things that we have as a driving theme here is this idea of a stereotype about Black men kind of inheriting generational trauma and operating from that perspective. And certainly we can know and appreciate that. But how can we frame this kind of from an asset model lens? Like, what are things that we also inherit besides trauma, and how is it that we can be comfortable in negotiating, mental health? And what does it have to do with generations? I mean, I'm here, I'm healthy, so I'm good. I mean, I'm fully baked. Obviously, that's not the case, but can you lean in and help us a little bit?
It's funny that you asked that particular question. Recently, I was reading a case study, if you will, or done by, I think it was the Pew Research Center. And they were saying that the moves that we make now as parents have a ripple effect of 8 or 9 generations. Mm-hmm. And I want that to breathe just for a moment, because
say it again.
That the moves that we make right now, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, all the leads, right? Mm. That they have a ripple effect of 8 or 9 generations, which means that I need to really start considering. And as we have this conversation, my children are just running through my head right now, because I'm first generation born in the United States. My parents are from Jamaica.
Okay.
And those who have West Indian parents already know, whether you're from Haiti, Grenada, no matter where you are throughout the West Indies, we were raised to certain emotions, and being able to be emotional was not a thing as far as our fathers were concerned. Mm. But I find myself having to teach my children that now, because I'm not going to call it necessarily a generational curse, but I don't want my children growing up feeling that they can't feel. Okay. Or that makes them less of a man because they feel. So
how did you, the question then I wonder is, how did you get here? You seem well-adjusted, healthy, you're talking clearly, you're talking about doing research on, the rippling effects and all that kind of stuff.
I think breakthrough is a major part of it. And breakthrough, if I could define it, is a sudden burst of higher knowledge, if you will, that allows you to push past your resistance point.
Okay.
Right? So being in the company of people, or just deciding to change some things, because we're not crazy. We know what our environment looks like. We know what it produces. And we know what we felt growing up in some of the environments we grew up in. And when we were young, we would watch things like The Cosby Show, which was evidence of the fact, like, hold up, I know art imitates life. So if that is something that could possibly be out there, then there is something different. I think the part of it is the courage enough to go and see what's different from my current environment.
Okay. One of the things that was shared earlier by Maceo is he was talking about this idea of being reflexive and kind of seeing what's going on. I think that was good and healthy and important. Can you help us, Heather, talk about how it is that we can? My perspective is always looking at being asset-based and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I think being reflexive is important. What are some other things that we have to consider when we're thinking about things generationally? Because I think that so often, again, we're so compelled to attend to the here and now that we're not necessarily thinking about what our parents did or how we were brought up or all that kind of stuff. That kind of is a luxury. Hey, that's a luxury white folks can enjoy, but I gotta,
sure.
make the bacon.
Put food on the table. Okay. Yeah, I think it's, a couple things come to mind. One is, I think people define trauma in very different ways. So I think to sort of define it and it's an experience that really overwhelms us in some ways. We don't have capacity or the skills in order to deal with what's going on.
Thank you.
But I think that a lot of, you were talking about sort of like that burst.
Yeah.
A lot of that sometimes comes from looking at the trauma. So instead of putting it in the past always, not living in it, but instead of putting it in the past and just moving forward, to look at it. And there's strengths to pull from our traumas. I mean, we are people who are evidenced by that, right? We are the most resourceful, resilient people there are. And so, but that came out of our traumas. So I think both seeing how you can become a little bit more familiar with and curious about those traumas and what you can pull from them. And then I think the other part that you said is really important, where we think about, yes, what we inherited, but also what we are passing. So I think a lot of it we get stuck on what we got, but we're going to give as well.
Yeah.
So having that thread where we're looking at both sides of that is really important.
So you all help me with this a little bit, and I want you to kind of get into your bag, right? In where is it that you're coming from? So if you could communicate with us kind of the perspective or the lens through which you're understanding these things is I think helpful to make sure that we're able to ground ourselves. But I'm curious also, I have said as we came out here, and even in pre-conversation, I think I've talked about, framing things as an asset and asset-based, and I think that is that overreaching or overreacting perhaps? Because one of the things that I always think in doing my research and study on identity and whatnot, I always think about Black folks are framed within pathology. And that pathology seems to always touch trauma. And why do I have to look at my trauma and all that? Because that's a negative. But I wonder if, and I really love how it is that you framed it for us, is that trauma is something that's overwhelming, but it's something that we do have to deal with. So for us to talk about assets, we can be resilient, we can be defiant, but we also have to define the context and where we are. So can you talk to us, each of you, a little bit, again, about the lens through which you help people understand where they are, maybe your own personal journey? And then we all talked about this, again, in pre-conversation. We want to make sure that we drill down on some techniques or some tools that people can take away. So we don't just want to be up here talking and, having enlightening conversations among each other in front of y'all, but what are some tangible things that we can take away? So first, how do you step into addressing trauma, addressing generational impact?
So I think for me, one of the first things is to realize that therapy is not a bad word.
Say that.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, repeat yourself a lot, huh?
Yeah. To be honest with you, like for real, if I'm just speaking real transparently, I'm in a season of my life where I'm trying to be the best version of myself I could possibly be. And there's good and bad to that, because I can be my worst critic too, and be too much in my head about, man, I'm sorry, I almost said the N-word. You could have did that a whole lot differently. And like for real, sometimes you grasp a situation, you learn the lesson, and you keep it moving. When you were speaking to trauma, I still think it's important for me to really properly process that, because like for real, I'm one of those people, I'm from Brooklyn, and so me and Mace was talking this morning, talking about our past experiences and how it affects us to this very day. Like I still carry, like those are things that still are resident with me. And if I'm not careful, like my sons, they all they know is the suburbs, but I realize they move the same way I move. And if I'm not careful, I could pass some stuff onto them through my trauma.
What's that mean? Give me some
like your nervous system.
Yes, right.
So that hypervigilance, that suspiciousness, that careful, which is useful. We need that.
Yep.
But you can pass it along to your sons, pulling from your past experiences and giving it to them when that's not their current reality.
But wait, let me ask that. No, I think that's so good. That's exactly where we want to go. But if I relinquish that and I let that go, I mean, am I really a man? You know what I'm saying? I mean, how are you looking at me right now?
It's funny.
Wait, you interrupted me, son. I mean, I don't even
my
understand.
bad,
Right?
my bad.
No, but I
bad.
think there is, of course, that hypervigilance because we've been conditioned to think and to believe that that's how you lean into black masculinity, right? So how is it that we begin to soften ourselves up? You talk about therapy is not a bad word. Are there any other devices that we need to look at so that we can help our kids and our elders maybe even be like, hey, you're in a safe space.
We are moving into spring now, right? You won't find me in the spring or in the summer wearing a triple fat goose, right? Because I'll pass the blank out, right? I think one of the tools that I use personally is realizing that the next seasons of life that I'm transitioning through, there's some old mindsets that don't serve me well in the new season that I'm in.
Yes.
So like, there's some things about how I think in terms of how I was raised in Flatbush that don't necessarily serve me well in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Gotcha.
Like, I'm not in that environment no more. My therapist told me, you still move that way, but you're not in that environment no more. And here you are knocking on 53, but you still move like you. You were talking about that hypervigilance and stuff. Like, my son walks into places, he ain't never lived in Brooklyn a day in his life, but he always look over his shoulder. Why? Because I always see daddy look over his shoulder. And so, to your point, that's one of the first things, is to realize that the places and spaces that I'm moving into, the old mindset don't serve me in those places and spaces. So what do I got to do? Release it. And that's challenging because I feel like sometimes I'm releasing a part of me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
But it's necessary. So.
Yeah.
Can I share a personal story?
Please.
So I'll just share how often I show up in the world as my 6-year-old self.
Wow.
Okay.
So I was raised by a single black man, and he loved me dearly, a wonderful provider, and also a very intolerant, impatient, sometimes just grumpy guy, right? Yeah. And in that, I learned to not make mistakes. Those were too dangerous. I might get berated. I might get punished. I might get raped. And I also learned to read him. So I learned to read what kind of mood he was in without him saying anything. So that's my hypervigilance. So being aware of that, when I need to make a decision about how I want to speak to my children, what I want to share with my husband, or a new venture I want to do in my private practice, I have to be mindful that I am fearful of making a mistake, but that will keep me stuck. And so a practical skill is when I feel that sensation in my body of being wrong, of making a mistake, of not doing about not being brave, I have to recognize I'm in my 6-year-old self. And so, how do I want to move right now? How can I be brave in that moment? How can I know that I'm going to learn from a mistake that I make, right? So then I can make that my strength. I'm going to be brave in this moment. I'm going to be resilient in this moment. I am going to do the hard thing. I'm going to be willing to be wrong, and that's all going to be okay.
Well, how do you know it's going to be okay?
I know it's going to be okay because I don't have the same kind of consequences that I had then. It was unsafe to make a mistake then. And my body is working on my behalf, right? It's telling me, don't do that. You might make a mistake. There's consequences if you do that. And I have to now, I'm not going to say my age, not a chance, but now in my current self, I have to tell her, it's okay. It's okay if you do that. It's okay if you make a mistake. And my body's working for me to say, like, step into it. And then, and then I pull a string, learn to be resilient. I learn to be brave. I learn to tolerate that feeling of having made a mistake.
Where does that awareness, you were talking a little bit, again, riffing on this reflexivity, where does that awareness come from that allows you to have developed, because you're talking about the work of being brave enough to talk to your 60-year-old self and say the consequences aren't going to be the same, but you also have done the work to put yourself in a different, safer space, it sounds like. So how do you begin to do that? I'm curious. And then I need you guys to therapize me on this other thing that happened this morning with me and my son. I got to ask you about that too before we dip.
I think for me, one of the things that has helped me is developing a spiritual fabric for myself, if that makes sense, is that I don't operate in and of myself. I know that there's a God. I know that I was created in his image and in his likeness. You talked about being reflexive and all of that stuff. There's texts that normally run through my head like, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Those things stay resident in my mind because they help me from a spiritual place navigate some of the difficulties and challenge, which further let me know I was never designed or created to experience them on my own. And truth be told, some of them that I experienced, I did because I lifted up some stuff that I was never ordained to lift up in the first place. So that's part of it for me. Yeah.
So tell me this, in terms of your faith and connecting to your faith journey, because I know that's very intimately attached to how it is that you speak to and are in conversation with other people that help them heal. What was your pathway toward that, right? And I'm asking you, because Merce was saying this morning that he was able to do whatever he was able to do kind of professionally, artistically, but he knew that at home, he had to go to church the next day.
Yeah.
So are there devices there that some people might reference? Because I think that sometimes even referring to religion or to a higher being, sometimes that could be even construed as being soft. So what gives you some permission to do that? What are some things that you can employ there?
So I would say for me, a couple of things that I get curious. I get curious about the patterns that keep showing up in my life. I want to understand that. Like I'm getting the same lesson again and again and again in a different, sort of scenario. But so starting to look at the patterns of your life and if there's any connecting thread around that and being curious, not blaming or that inner critic coming up, but just curiosity. It's a big word for me and useful in my practice. What else? I would say my body, connecting to my body is a really big thing. I think it never steers me wrong.
Can you give us an example of that? We had talked about before. Give us an example. I know you talked about talking to your 6-year-old self, but again, going to some pre-conversation we had when you were like, well, we need to breathe. I'm like, don't nobody want to breathe. But why and how is that important? Being able to take perhaps time to breathe, or what are other techniques that people can use to be in touch with their body so that they can kind of just slow down a bit?
Well, a fact that I share with my clients that seems to be impactful is that your body cannot simultaneously be in a state of anxiety and be breathing deeply. It's not possible. It's not physiologically possible. That's why breath work is important. So it sounds, I work with teenagers too, all kind of eye rolling around breath work. I get it, but it's a tool that's always available to you. So there's that piece. And then I say again, like when you get into a situation, notice what your body is talking to you about. So when you're interacting with a colleague or a relative and you get that tight pit in your stomach, that's information. That is data around something that's going on with that relationship, that circumstance, and so use that. Be careful. What does that mean? Why every time that, I get that and try to see what that's connected to. And then I'll say lastly, and this is, way underneath all the stuff, we're all operating under a set of beliefs. So deep down, my belief was mistakes are not okay. And to get underneath the real belief Or another belief of mine, my dad was big on we spend money on things we need, not what we want. So then I've developed an entire relationship with money around that, right? So I have to look at what is my belief about money? Is it only for the things that I need, and does that sit well with me? I work, like, can't I have some fun? You know, like looking at that again. So those are a couple of the three things that I try to look: the beliefs, the body sensations, and those strategies like breath work.
No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think for me it's being in my upbringing. For me, I always had, even from an early age, one foot in the church and one foot in the street. Like I said, my parents are West Indian. Church is a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like my parents are Adventists, so it would be Sabbath school, and it would be divine worship, and then, like, for real, Wednesday night prayer meeting, like, and they made us go, whether we wanted to or not, whether we was, like, for real, if you were living under my roof, this was it. Until I got to the place where I was just like, because it felt restrictive. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I understood, like, yo, that's a dope way of life. Why? Because there's safety right in that. There's safety in it. I can't even tell you the amount of friends, and I always think about this kind of stuff from a practical standpoint. I can't even count on my hands how many friends I lost. Because they didn't have that same kind of thing that I had in terms of just being connected to something that's faith-based. And so I always knew that it was, you said how it can be perceived as soft. I would rather be softer than a grave. If that is how you perceive it. Yeah. Me and Mace were talking about it the other day. Actually earlier on today, he said some people would mistake him for being soft because he was vulnerable enough to cry in front of certain people until he gave you that 1-2, and then you found out, okay, if that's the case, then how you look then for somebody soft to give you the business. And I thought about it from a principle standpoint the same way I look at my spirituality. If that's what make me soft, I could tell you how many dudes who didn't have what I had and they now sitting 6 feet under.
And so with that, I want to thank you, Quest Green, Heather Primus, for giving us tools and for really allowing us to contextualize ourselves. I really like how it is that we started, the devices we gave ourselves in the center, but this idea of generational trauma and generational health for Black men is not just about the here and now and what we receive, but what it is that we're giving also. So what is our responsibility to be healthy? So I thank you all for sharing with us and appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.